On the night of March 1st, 1932, all was quiet at the Lindbergh estate in Hopewell, New Jersey. But by morning, the world's most famous family would be at the center of America's most infamous crime. From the second-floor nursery of the Lone Eagles home, 20-month-old Charles Augustus Lindbergh Jr. was gone, taken from his crib, a homemade ladder abandoned beneath the window. What followed was a story that stunned the nation. Ransom notes and secret negotiations, volunteers and vigilantes, suicides and suspects, and the weight of an investigation that pulled in everyone from J. Edgar Hoover to the President of the United States. When little Charlie's body was discovered 2 months later in the woods not far from the Lindbergh home, the crime shifted from kidnapping to murder. But the question wasn't just who could commit such an atrocity, but whether the man convicted and executed for the crime was guilty at all. Because nearly a century later, the Lindbergh kidnapping remains clouded in doubt, mystery, and conspiracy. This is the Lindbergh baby kidnapping, Inside America's Crime of the Century, Part 1. Hey, y'all, I'm Chris Calvert.
And I'm her husband, Rob Potter. Welcome to Hitch to Homicide.
For better or worse.
Till death do us part.
Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome. And I have a very obscure one today. This is...
Wait a second. They're all obscure, usually.
Yeah, this one's at the top.
Okay.
This is for our Carolinian-speaking friends, which is in the Northern Mariana Islands.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tiro.
You are really, I'm telling you what.
I'm scraping the barrel.
When we head into season 7, we're going to be in trouble.
Hi.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Well, wherever you're listening, be sure to subscribe to Hitch to Homicide, then like, rate, and review the podcast so other true crime lovers can find us. And if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button below.
Yep.
If you want true crime with us all the time, please join our closed Facebook group. We're called the In-Laws and the Outlaws. Go to Facebook and type in H2H, In-Laws and Outlaws. Answer a couple questions. You are in. Go join.
Yes.
I post lots of photos, lots of other information. Great group of folks. That's our family. We love them.
We sure do.
You can find us on Instagram at Hitch to Homicide or on X at H2H_podcast. I got it right this week.
Yay.
I screwed that up last week. And we also have a Buy Me a Coffee link if you want to send Rob some coffee. He drinks it every episode. It's actually like 60 degrees outside right
chilly
now where we are. So we're sort of savoring this false fall because we know it's going to be 98 probably next week.
The Indians are going to show up with their summer.
That's right. You can find that link in our show notes. You can also send us a text. The link to that is at the top of the show notes where it says, send Chris and Rob a text, and I got a bunch of them.
Yeah.
From Richmond, Virginia, I am the granddaughter of Gussie, the youngest surviving son of Michael Schiller. I remember taking him to North Dakota to stay with his sister, who he called Frederica, for 2 weeks while we as a family vacationed sometime in the early 70s. And this is so interesting because this was a case from 1903. Michael Schiller, he murdered his estranged wife in the backyard and he died by electric chair. Eventually, he's the guy that they just had to keep turning on the electric chair. But he had 3 children, remember, and they were all split up.
Wow.
So thank you, granddaughter of Gussie, for emailing us. That was such a tragic case, but I'm happy to know that Mary's children were together as adults. Yeah. So thank you very much.
All right.
From Erica in New Zealand, Erica girl, we're so glad to have you back. Hi, Rob and Chris. This is Erica from New Zealand. I'm back, baby.
Back and better than ever.
I missed the stories over these last months, and I still haven't gotten to Jane Doe 4. Come on, Erica. Come on.
Help us out.
But it's next on my list. Happy to be listening again. Much love. Well, we love you too, Erica.
Hi, Erica.
And if you haven't started reading the Jane Doe series, go download Jane Doe Scarlet. It's free.
Yeah.
You can get it free anywhere. Kindle and Apple and Barnes & Noble, Google, you name it.
Yep.
We got one from Melinda in Charleston, West Virginia. I love the chit chat. It's what makes your podcast lovable. Thanks for entertaining me every week. Thank you, Melinda. We're glad you like the chit chat. We're just real people talking about real people.
Yeah.
So chit chat is required as far as we're concerned.
This is the same chit chat we have at dinner. Breakfast.
We talk true crime at dinner.
Yeah.
And for those who don't like it, well, just fast forward. We're fine with that.
It's technology.
It is.
Fast forward.
I fast forward through stuff all the time in podcasts that I'm listening to.
Yeah.
Well, Rob, you know I love historical cases. I've actually gotten more than 2 or 3 emails about how people love it when I do historical cases. And this was on the docket for me to do at the end of July, but I was so sick, and then August was a nightmare. So I'm going to talk about it for 2 weeks in September instead.
Cool.
Before I get started, I want to thank some sources: the LA Times, the Santa Cruz Sentinel, the New York Times, the Washington Post, United Press International Archives, Rutgers University, crimetraveler.org, newengland.org, FBI.gov, and the New Jersey State Police Museum, among others, but I will list them all in the show notes.
All right. Well, you ready?
I am.
Let's do it.
Charles Augustus Lindbergh was born on February 4th, 1902 in Detroit, Michigan. Listen, Rob loves anybody who flies an airplane, so I expect lots of input from him today. He had no idea I was doing this case, so I expect lots of input. Right. His parents are Carl Monson, a Swedish immigrant who changes his last name to Carl August Lindbergh after coming to the States as an infant. And his mother is Evangeline Lodge Land Lindbergh from Detroit. And I'm just going to say it right now, lots of great names in the podcast, okay?
Cool.
His mom is his father's second wife. He has 2 older siblings. In 1909, his parents split, and he divides his time between Little Falls, Minnesota, and Washington, D.C., because his father is a United States congressman.
Right.
And his dad's famous for his opposition into the United States entry into World War I, and he actually wrote a book about it called Why Is Your Country at War? And this book was seized by the federal agents under the Comstock Act. And just for reference, in case you don't know what the Comstock Act is, it was the suppression of trade in and circulation of obscene literature articles of immoral use, which included obscenity, contraceptives, drugs that caused abortion, sex toys, personal letters with any sexual content, or any information regarding the above items.
That would be pretty much everything in these days. It's
basically a book ban.
Yeah.
And it included James Joyce's Ulysses, Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, which are pretty dirty if you know them. D.H. Lawrence's Lady Chatterley's Lover, as well as this book that is written by Charles's father. So Charles's mom is a chemistry teacher at Cass Technical High School in Detroit, and then later at Little Falls High School in Minnesota, where Charles will graduate on June 5th, 1918. And after graduation, he enrolls at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, but he drops out. And I also read that he flunked out. So who knows which is true, which brings me to a really important point before we get too deep into this case. There's a lot about Charles Lindbergh that has been changed or glossed over because the guy's going to become a national treasure to our country. He's a hero.
Right.
So there are lots of things. So whether he flunked out or he left, you just don't really know.
Well, I have my Ohio University sweatshirt on today, and I didn't flunk out. So
Good for you.
There you go.
Regardless, he leaves school second semester, sophomore year, and because he'd always had an inquisitive mind about cars and planes, he enrolled at the Nebraska Aircraft Corporation's flying school in Lincoln, Nebraska, and flew for the very first time on April 9th, 1922, as a passenger in a two-seat biplane.
Oh, wow.
And before he went to Lincoln to learn how to fly, he had never seen an airplane up close in person.
Really?
No.
Wow.
He just knew that that's what he wanted to do. So he started taking formal flying lessons. And because he couldn't afford the damage bond or the insurance that would pay for the plane if he crashed it while he's trying to learn to fly, he leaves the flying school in June of 1922 and began barnstorming. And barnstorming, or being a barnstormer, meant you were an entertainer.
Yeah.
You were like a stunt pilot. It's like a flying circus.
Okay.
And after they would negotiate with a local farmer to use a field as a runway, they needed someplace to take off and land, these barnstormers would come in and they would sell airplane rides in these biplanes. And they would also just perform stunts for them.
You know, it's always amazing to me when I hear stories like this is that, you know, I think of my grandmother Podorf. She was a wonderful woman. I was very close to her. But thinking about when you say 1922 is when he first saw an airplane, it's just amazing to me that my grandmother was alive when aviation was born. And she probably saw an airplane for the first time and went, oh my gosh, look at that. It's crazy.
Listen, my grandmother lived to be almost 100 years old, and she remembered when women got the right to vote. She was a little girl.
Yeah.
But during the Roaring 20s, this barnstorming stuff, it's huge. And Charles did this all across Nebraska and Kansas, Colorado, Wyoming, and Montana. And Charles was a wing walker.
Really?
He would walk out onto the wing as the plane is flying.
I didn't know that.
He's a daredevil for sure.
Wow.
And he's also a parachutist. And he did this thing where he would have two parachutes and they would drop him and one would come off and it would look like it failed so that everybody would gasp, think he's just going to plummet to the ground.
Yeah.
And then the second one would open up and everybody would cheer.
At least he would hope that the second one would open up.
Yeah. But he left the barnstorming gig and went home to his father's place in Minnesota later in 1922. And he wouldn't get in a plane again for another year until he purchased a World War I surplus biplane. It was a Curtiss JN-4, nicknamed...
I don't know.
Oh, I thought you would know this.
I'm not big on World War I stuff.
Nicknamed Jenny, a Curtiss JN-4, nicknamed Jenny.
All right.
And it just made me think of Forrest Gump. It's the Jenny.
Yeah.
I only knew one. There was only one name that could go on my boat. It's the Jenny. But Charles buys this plane in a place called Americus, Georgia. And even though he hasn't piloted a plane on his own, and even though he hasn't flown in 6 months, he takes his own plane up by himself. He paid $500 for this plane, which is about $9,500 today. And after 1 week of practice in Georgia, where he got his 5 whole hours of, quote, pilot in command time, end quote.
What could go wrong?
He takes off from Americus, Georgia, for Montgomery, Alabama, which is 140 miles west, and this is his first cross-country flight.
Wow.
Weeks later, he would do his first night flight.
Yeah. That's just brave. Or stupid. I don't know which.
He's got a lot of confidence in himself. He really does. He's built differently.
Yeah.
He's built differently. Now, for the rest of the year, with his own plane, he went back to barnstorming, where he earned the name Daredevil Lindbergh. And a year later, in 1924, Charles reports to a year of military flight training with the United States Army Air Service. And out of 104 cadets who began training, he was one of 18 who finished.
Really?
He was first in his class, And in March of 1925, he earned his Army pilot's wings and a commission as a second lieutenant in the Air Service Reserve Corps. And since the Army didn't need active duty pilots, he went back to barnstorming and being a flight instructor because he's making too much money doing it.
Sure.
And eventually he's going to be promoted to captain, and then he'll go on to be a colonel in the service, in the United States service.
Gotcha.
Now, while he's working as a flight instructor at Lambert St. Louis Flying Field in St. Louis, Missouri, he's hired by the Robertson Aircraft Corporation to serve as a chief pilot for the newly designated 278-mile contract air route number 2 that would go between St. Louis and Chicago. He's going to become an airmail pilot.
I was going to say, is that for the Postal Service?
Yeah, he's carrying the mail.
Nice.
And it had 2 stops, in Springfield, Missouri, and in Peoria, Illinois. He was along with 2 other pilots flying this modified surplus de Havilland DH-4 biplane. So they're in these biplanes, but they've modified them so they can carry extra fuel and all your mail.
Right.
And if you don't know what a biplane is, it's open air. So you can't get too high because there's no oxygen.
Right.
So think like Snoopy, right?
The Red Baron.
The Red Baron.
Yeah.
But there are lots of risks, especially in bad weather and at night. And Charles executed his oath of mail messengers, and 2 days later, he's off flying. Mm-hmm. And in that year, he had a few close calls, but he always delivered the mail. He's like Karl Malone, and he always delivers.
He does.
See, Chris knows sports.
The mailman.
That's right. In February of 1927, Charles leaves the mail business and goes to San Diego, California, to oversee the design and construction of a plane, the Spirit of St. Louis. He wants to have a go at the world's first nonstop transatlantic flight between New York City and Paris, France.
Right.
And if you accomplish that feat, French-born hotelier Raymond Ortigue would give you $25,000. He actually owned the Brevoort and the Lafayette hotels in Manhattan. And there are 6 people who either disappeared or died somewhere over the Atlantic while trying to do this. But Charles thought that his design and his piloting could do it. But Charles didn't have that kind of money. He didn't have the kind of money it took to build the custom aircraft for a transatlantic gamble.
Right.
But he had something just as valuable. He had a reputation as a gutsy airmail pilot in St. Louis and a group of civic backers who believed in him. 9 St. Louis businessmen, known as the St. Louis Backers, gave him $15,000, and Charles used $2,000 of his own money.
Nice.
And with another $1,000 donated by the Robertson Aircraft Corporation, where he worked, he was able to get started on his plane. So he's got $18,000, or $385,000 in today's money. And the Spirit of St. Louis was built. It was born. And this $18,000 or $385K, it was way less than any of his rival pilots were getting to build and or pilot their planes for this exact same journey. So Charles is balling on a budget.
Yeah, big time.
But he believes in himself. He takes off on the morning of Friday, May 20th, 1927, from Roosevelt Field on Long Island. He's loaded up with 450 gallons of fuel, and over the next 33 and a half hours, he skims the storm clouds at 10,000 feet and the wave tops as low as 10 feet. He had icing on his plane. He flew blind through fog for several hours. And Charles navigated by what's called dead reckoning, which means he calculated his speed and direction and heading over time based on where he came from. So it was from point A to point B kind of thing. He's mathing. He's making math work for him.
Yep.
Which means maybe he didn't flunk out of school. Maybe he did leave the University of Wisconsin.
I'm just glad it wasn't me because I would have ended up in Australia.
You wouldn't have enough fuel. You'd end up in the Atlantic is where you'd end up, like the 6 other people who didn't make it.
Yeah.
But Charles didn't use the stars or the sun, and a radio was too heavy, and he believed they were unreliable. He landed in Paris at Le Bourget Aerodrome at 10:22 p.m. on Saturday, May 21st, to a crowd of over 150,000 people who stormed the field.
And there are videos of that you can look up online. It's pretty cool to see.
Yes. And I will show some of them. If you're watching on YouTube, you're going to see some of them.
Cool.
But the French Foreign Office flew the American flag, and they saluted Lindbergh. It was the first time this had ever happened for someone who was not a head of state. Now, when he comes home to the United States, he receives unprecedented praise for his historic flight. And the New York Times said people were, quote, behaving as though Lindbergh had walked on water, not flown over it, end quote. I thought that was good. All the newspapers were printing his headlines above the fold, which is important. If you know anything about old newspapers, above the fold, it said, Lindbergh does it. And his mom's house in Detroit had 1,000 people surrounding it.
Wow.
Countless newspapers, magazines, and radio shows wanted to interview him. Everybody wanted a piece of him. He was flooded with job offers from companies, think tanks, and universities. And on his way back to the United States on the Navy cruiser USS Memphis, a fleet of warships and multiple flights of military aircraft escorted him up the Potomac River to the Washington Navy Yard, where Calvin Coolidge was waiting for him to give him the Distinguished Flying Cross.
You know, I think that's what's sad about what's missing from our past. You know, ticker tape parades and heroes and things like that. Because you think about, you know, Alan Shepard, Neil Armstrong, and all those guys.
Yeah.
I mean, New York City, it was just like, it was ticker tapes. And people went crazy.
Absolutely
nuts.
nuts.
End of World War II, you know, ticker tapes, people going nuts. And these days, it's kind of like, it just doesn't happen anymore. It's kind of sad.
Well, he's going to get one of those too, but hang on.
All right.
The post office issued a stamp with his face, and when he flew from D.C. to New York City, he traveled up the Canyon of Heroes to City Hall and received a ticker tape parade witnessed by 400,000 people in New York City.
Yep.
After he was bestowed awards, there were 500-person banquets. There was a special act of Congress. He got the Medal of Honor, despite the fact that he wasn't even in combat. He was the very first Time Magazine Person of the Year, but they called him the Man of the Year back then.
Right.
And he remained the youngest until 2019. He published an autobiography that was translated into several languages and sold more than 650,000 copies. He went on tours, 82 cities, 48 states, including visiting the Brown Hotel in Louisville, Kentucky. On August 9th, 1927, he was greeted by 100,000 Kentuckians at Bowman Field, which is a regional airfield, and there was a 700-person banquet held in his honor. He toured 16 Latin American countries between 1927 and 1928. And he was quoted at one point as saying about his historic flight, quote, "There were times in an airplane when it seemed I had escaped mortality to look down on earth like a god," end quote.
Wow. Okay.
Just call me a golden god. I am a golden god.
Jump.
A year and 2 days later, after his flight, the Spirit of St. Louis went on public display at the Smithsonian. It's there to this day at the National Air and Space Museum. Rob and I have actually seen it. It's not very big.
It's not at all.
So imagine him flying for over 33 and a half hours with 400 gallons of fuel and nothing to guide him but math.
And he's kind of looking out the side of the plane because there's not a cockpit window.
No.
Yeah.
And he even said he was flying 10 feet above the waves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just looking out the window. Okay, I'm 10 feet.
Okay. I hope he didn't do that at night. I'm sure he didn't, but who knows? He's such a daredevil. He's a wing walker, for goodness sake. I'm surprised he wasn't like, I'm just going to walk out here. I'm going to put it on autopilot. I'll just walk out here on the wing and have a little something to eat.
Yeah.
But now remember his autobiography. It's titled We. And in it, he says that the barnstorming pilots he met while working with them, that they were all womanizers. And the Army cadets he used to fly with, they had very superficial approaches to relationships. And according to Charles, the ideal romance was stable and long-term with a woman with keen intellect, good health, and strong genes. Just like me, honey.
There you go,
I was
baby.
waiting for you to say it. I was waiting for you to chime in. I had to say it myself.
Sorry.
You see, in his experience in breeding animals on his farm, it taught him the importance of having good genes. He was really into eugenics. And that's something that the Nazis are going to adopt. Charles believes that the human race can be improved with selective reproduction. And for the record, it's unscientific, it's racially biased, and it's stupid.
Yeah, a little bit.
And that's called foreshadowing.
Here we go.
Yep. After all the hullabaloo, the medals, the accolades, the money, Charles Lindbergh is officially the nation's most eligible bachelor. He's the OG bachelor. Just imagine him on TV. He's the man. Every woman wanted to be with him. And he's got all this money. So he gets himself a financial advisor, Dwight Morrow, who's a partner at J.P. Morgan and Company. And Dwight was also the U.S. ambassador to Mexico in 1927. And Dwight just happened to have 3 daughters. Anne, who was 21, Constance, who was 18, and Elizabeth, who was 14. Now, Charles meets all of them in Mexico City in December of 1927 when he accepts the invitation of Dwight to spend Christmas with his family. You think Dwight had an ulterior motive there?
You think?
Come spend Christmas with me and my wife and my 3 beautiful daughters.
My 3 eligible daughters.
Now, at first, Charles actually courts Elizabeth, the youngest daughter.
How old was he at this time?
She's 14 and he is 27.
Okay.
Yeah. Elizabeth actually went by Betty.
Okay.
She's 14, he's 27. But after a couple months, he stops paying attention to the 14-year-old.
Yeah.
And he begins to date the oldest daughter, who was quieter and very, very smart. Always marry somebody who's smart.
Absolutely. I can attest to that.
There, he got it. He got it in, y'all. He got it in. There it is. There it is. I will be fixing him dinner tonight.
Nice. I got some garlic knots up there waiting on me.
By the next year, 1928, Charles was writing to Anne and inviting her on flights. I mean, it doesn't get any sexier than that. Hey, you want to go fly in my plane, honey? Yeah. Also in 1928, Dwight's youngest daughter, Elizabeth, who goes by Betty, she's the baby, she receives a letter threatening to abduct and kill her unless $50,000 is paid and placed in a specially made box in a cemetery.
Wow.
That's called foreshadowing.
Again.
This is a big case. Lots of foreshadowing.
All right.
In 1929, Charles proposes to Anne, and on May 27th, 1929, these two get married in Englewood, New Jersey. They're in love, and Charles thought that Anne had all the right attributes. She had a keen intellect, good health, strong genes.
Healthy teeth.
Good bones. Yeah, right. He also taught her how to fly, and she went up with him a lot. And Anne assisted him in his exploration and the charting of air routes. So, I mean, she's a really smart cookie. She's up there flying with him and she's charting stuff.
Sure.
So she's helping him out.
Okay.
And even when Anne becomes pregnant with their first child, she flies with Charles. when she's 7 months pregnant in an open-air cockpit at high altitude where oxygen levels are lowered.
Wow.
She's 7 months pregnant. And after they return home, when she's been on this flight with him, Anne is hospitalized for 4 days. And when the press questions him about her being in the hospital, Charles lies. He said, quote, "There's nothing wrong with Mrs. Lindbergh except she's tired," end quote. Yeah, she's tired of you taking her up 10,000 feet where she can't breathe.
Yeah, exactly.
He's a very private person. Even though he's so publicly known, he's very private. And he loved attention at the same time, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
Sure.
So I think he had his public persona and he loved all that attention, but he also wanted to keep everything about himself that was personal.
Sure.
Everything had to be on his terms. He was a man with a schedule and a plan, and he kept it. Like if there were Excel spreadsheets back then, he would have been a good one. He would have been a master of one.
The king.
He would have been the king of Excel.
Yeah.
And as a father, he had already decided he was going to be a strict disciplinarian. Like he hasn't even had a child yet. And he's already saying, when this kid comes around, he's not going to get away with anything.
Yep.
And later in life, he actually made Anne keep track of his children's infractions, like chewing gum.
Good Lord.
And they were punished for it.
Wow.
And he also made Anne account for every penny that went out of their household.
Man.
Can you say control?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, yes, every now and then I have to hide an Amazon package from Rob, but who hasn't done that? Right? I mean, am I right or am I right?
I always see when they come.
I know he does. It was a joke, honey. It was a joke. He had an obsession that was well known with order and routine and privacy, and it sort of consumed his life. And there were those who said that he was a social misfit, that he was this rigid loner. And he was also known to be a, quote, practical joker. And remember how I said they kind of like gloss over some of the things that maybe he is or isn't?
Right.
So he was considered a practical joker, but a lot of people who knew him or wrote about him said he was actually cruel. It was cruel behavior that he directed at people that he didn't like. And if he wanted to dominate them, he would be cruel to them. And there's even a story about him and his roommate during his air mail piloting days. His roommate returned from a night on the town. He'd been drinking, and he took a drink from a pitcher that was in the room thinking it was ice water, and discovered that Charles had taken the ice water out that was usually in it and replaced it with kerosene.
Ugh.
And the drunk pilot who drank the kerosene, before realizing and then spitting it out, he nearly died.
Wow.
So that's his kind of practical joke.
Yeah.
On June 22nd, 1930, a little over a year after Charles and Anne are married, the first baby is born. Charles Augustus Lindbergh Jr., Little Charlie. But after little Charlie's first birthday, Charles and Anne leave him with her parents while they survey the Orient. And the purpose of the flight was to scout the Great Circle Course, the fastest route from New York to Tokyo for use in commercial air routes. But this trip is actually cut short because Anne's father passes away and they return home to New Jersey. Now, before Charlie was born, the couple had been living in an uptown New York hotel suite since their honeymoon, but they decided to build a house because they're going to have this baby, right?
Right.
And they choose an area in the Sourland Mountains near Hopewell, New Jersey, which is about 60 miles north of New York City. Charles wanted to oversee the whole construction.
Of course he did.
All of it, because he's a control freak. But I have to tell you, when my parents built their first house, I remember my mother saying, "Your father knows every brick in this house."
Yeah.
But these two, they would stay in the new home on the weekends, even though the stone house on 500 acres wasn't finished yet. So they're living in this house while it's being built. And during the week, they would stay at Anne's parents' home, the Morrow Estate in Englewood, New Jersey. So they would arrive on Saturday at their home under construction from the grandparents' home and stay until Monday, where they would head back, and she would head back to Inglewood with the baby, and Charles would go into the city for his job with the Transcontinental Air Transport. Okay. So it's a very firm, very rigid schedule. Remember, He's really firm and rigid about everything that he does.
Right.
Now, little Charlie's health has been a subject of lots of theories. There are those who say he was a perfect baby, a beautiful, bouncing baby boy. There are those that believe that Charlie was not perfect at all. His health and physical condition were pretty much hidden from most by his parents and his doctor. But there's one source that says the baby had a rickets-like condition that affected the development of strong bones. He required mega doses of vitamin D and daily exposure to a sun lamp that was kept by his crib. He had hammer toes on his left foot and an oversized cranium with unfused skull bones. His head hadn't completely, formed.
Right.
And I also read that there were those who believed he suffered from hydrocephaly, or fluid on the brain. Little Charles was put on a special diet, and the rumors that were out there that something was seriously wrong with the world's most famous baby, it's never going to go away. In January of 1934, the Joker, Charles, hid his little son, Charlie, in a closet and then told his wife and the nanny, whose name is Betty Gow, that the little boy was missing. And he let these two frantic women search the entire house for 20 minutes before admitting he had put Charlie in a closet.
Why would you joke about that?
I don't know.
Wow.
Yeah, and Charlie's less than 2 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who puts a baby in the closet?
Yeah.
Except if you're watching...
the Hangover.
Yeah, where the baby's in the closet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the kind of, quote, practical joking Charles would do, okay?
Yeah.
Kerosene and hiding the baby and watching two frantic women lose their mind.
Yeah.
On Tuesday, March 1st, 1932, Charles and Anne decide to stay one more night at the house in Hopewell in their new home. This is kind of unprecedented. They didn't usually do this. And little Charlie had a slight cold, and it was really chilly and windy outside. And Anne decided it would be best just to stay one more night, and they would wait there for Charles to return from New York because Charles worked in the city during the day.
Right.
And after that particular workday, Charles was scheduled to give a huge speech that night at NYU's alum organization. And present in the home that night are Charlie, little baby Charlie, his mom Anne, Big Charles eventually, 3 servants,
Okay.
Elsie Watley, an English cook, Ollie Watley, an English butler, and Elsie's husband, and Betty Gow, Charlie's Scottish nanny, who was sometimes at the Lindbergh's place and sometimes at the Morrow's place, Anne's parents.
Okay.
And on this night, Betty was asked to come from the Morrows to the Lindberghs because Anne was really tired. She wanted some extra help with little Charlie. Also on the premises is the family dog, Wagoosh.
Wagoosh?
Yeah, Wagoosh.
What kind of name is that?
He's a Boston Terrier, and the name came from a Native American word meaning fox.
Oh.
And my grandmother was Native American, and her last name was Fox.
Really?
Yeah.
So she was a Wagoosh.
She was a Wagoosh. If that's what it means in Cherokee, I don't know. At 6 p.m. that evening, baby Charlie eats dinner with Betty Gow in the nursery, the nanny, and then she gets him ready for bed. And Anne comes upstairs to visit his second floor room around 6:15, and again between 6:15 and 7:20 after dinner. But before tending to the baby, both Anne and Betty fasten the shutters closed in the nursery, with the exception of one shutter, because it was warped. So there's one shutter that doesn't close in the baby's room, which means, do they not have real windows? I mean, they've got just shutters. No wonder this baby has a cold, right?
Exactly. Especially they're living in New Jersey.
Yeah.
And what month is this?
March.
Wow. Okay.
Anne gives baby Charlie medicine and nose drops. I actually read that she rubbed Vicks Vapor Rub on his chest. We were still doing that in the 70s.
Yeah.
I don't know if they still do it today.
I don't know.
But she gives him medicine and nose drops, and then she leaves the nursery at one point to look for a needle and thread for Betty, because Betty, the nanny, is going to sew a new little flannel shirt for him because Charlie spit up on his first set of bedclothes. He's 20 months old. He doesn't feel well. He's thrown up, and his nanny is sitting there just sewing him a little flannel to sleep in.
Nice.
Also during this time, Dad Charles, calls the house to say he's going to be late, and he gives specific instructions that when little Charlie is put to bed, he is not to be coddled. He did not want anyone going in to check on him. He didn't want Anne, the mother, to check on him, and he didn't want the nanny to check on him either.
That's suspicious.
So Anne plays with little baby Charlie while Betty sews this little flannel shirt together. And at 7:30, Betty Gal, the nanny, puts Charlie to bed after putting on this little homemade shirt. Then after saying goodnight, Anne goes downstairs to wait for Charles to come home. And Betty goes into Charlie's bathroom to wash the first little shirt that he threw up on. And then Betty checks on Charlie just one more time, knowing they've been given specific instructions by Charles not to bother him. But she does check on him just one more time.
Okay.
Between 8:05 and 8:10, Anne thinks she hears the sound of car wheels on gravel. Then at 8:45, a time later than his usual arrival time, Charles drives up the half-mile driveway. He's driving up the driveway.
Right.
Their new house sits way off the road, and Charles pulls into the driveway, and he's honking his horn. He's honking his horn.
Okay.
If I had a sick 20-month-old baby and somebody showed up honking the horn after they had said, don't coddle this child,
Right.
there's going to be hell to pay. We're going to have some words. I don't care how long you flew your plane over the Atlantic, right? Charles and Anne have dinner together, and then they chat in their living room. Wagoosh is in his basket. He's alert, wide awake, very quiet.
Okay.
So just for reference, when Scotty is at home with me and Rob, and it's just the two of us, and even when the kids are here, he's awake and looking at everybody or walking around and quiet. If we have somebody show up to the house, he's putting on the machine guns and the extra bullets. He loses his mind.
Yeah.
And if you have a dog, even a little dog, you know that if a stranger shows up at the house, what are they doing?
Yep.
They're barking, especially at night. They can hear everything.
Yep.
Tons of stuff that we can't hear.
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to make that point, that Wagoosh is awake, but he's quiet.
Right.
Around 9:15, Charles says he hears a sound that sounded like, quote, the cracking of an orange crate falling off a chair, end quote, which is wildly specific.
Yeah.
Yeah. A few minutes later, Anne went to their bedroom to read, and Charles took a bath. Elsie, the cook, and Betty, the nanny, they're in Elsie's room trying on dresses, which just warmed my heart a little bit. You know, they both work there, but they're off duty, and they're trying on dresses.
Right.
At 10 p.m., Charles is in his study. Betty Gal, the nanny, goes downstairs, and she sees it's 10 o'clock and says, oh, I'm going to go check on the baby. I've got to go check on the baby. I can now check on the baby because it's 10 o'clock.
Right.
He's saying, leave him alone. Don't go in there.
Sure.
She enters the bathroom, turns on a light, and sets out this heater. She doesn't enter the nursery just yet. First, she goes to find Anne. She goes to find Mrs. Lindbergh and says, do you want to see the baby? Do you want to get the baby? Which to me, that's a great nanny. Do you want I don't want to step over on anybody's toes or overstep my bounds. If you want the baby, I will let you go do it. And then Elsie meets her in the hallway and says, Anne's preparing to take a bath. And that's the maid. And she says this to Betty. And Betty's like, okay, well, then I just won't bother her. I'll go check on the baby. And if she wants to see Charlie, she can just go through the connecting door because there was a door connecting the nursery to the master bedroom.
Right.
Betty returns to the nursery. She opens the door. She crosses the room, closes the French window because, it's open. She tries to close it. She plugs in an electric heater and crosses back to the crib. She feels all over the crib for the baby because it's dark. Mm-hmm. And the baby is gone. Mm-hmm. The baby is not there.
Wow.
Betty walks into Anne's room, Mrs. Lindbergh, through the bathroom door, and she asks, "Do you have the baby? Did you pick up the baby?" And then she says to Mrs. Lindbergh, "Do you know where Colonel Lindbergh is?" But she doesn't get an answer, only this kind of like bewildered look. Anne's like, "What do you mean, do I have the baby?" And then Betty runs to find Colonel Lindbergh. And Betty says to him, "Colonel, do you have the baby? Please don't fool me." Because remember, he's a jokester.
Right.
And Colonel Lindbergh runs past Betty and goes into the nursery and then into the bedroom and gets his rifle. He re-enters the nursery with Betty, where he finds Anne and says, quote, "Anne, they have stolen our baby," end quote.
Okay.
So it's like, who's got the baby? So while they're trying to figure out who's got the baby, Charles grabs his rifle and runs into the room and then goes and gets his wife. They've stolen our child.
Yeah.
Charles tells Betty to get Ollie, the butler, and then Charles and Betty and Elsie and Ollie search the house for the baby. And when he's not found, Charles then tells Ollie, "Call the police." And it's important to say that at first, Betty thought that Charles Lindbergh had merely taken the baby and put him someplace else. Again.
Right.
And after they search the whole house and Charles and the rest of the staff drive up and down the road, flashing headlights, looking into the woods, looking for someone with the baby. It's 500 acres in the middle of nowhere in New Jersey, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And when Charles returns to the house after driving up and down the road, he goes into the nursery alone, and only then does he find an envelope in plain view on a radiator beneath a window. Charles tells everyone, "Don't touch it. We've got to preserve the fingerprints." At 10:15, Ollie calls the Hopewell Police Deputy Charles Williams, who is on that night, and he gets the chief of police, Harry Wolfe, out of bed, and they drive to the Lindbergh's home at 10:45. And according to Ollie the butler, that's when these two men arrive. Charles meets them at the front door, accompanied by Anne, and Charles tells Williams and Wolfe that he heard a noise, but that it didn't impress him due to the windy night. And then Charles shows the nursery to Williamson and Wolfe. And these two go back downstairs and out the front door and into the yard, and they examine the ground under the nursery window. And they see holes allegedly left by a ladder and footprints.
Okay.
They see a 3-section ladder about 75 feet away from the house, and one section of the ladder appeared to be broken. One of the rungs on the ladder, it was snapped.
Okay.
When Chief Wolfe and Deputy Williams see the envelope, they look inside and find a crude ransom note demanding $50,000. It said, quote, "Dear sir, have $50,000 ready, R-E-D-Y, $25,000 in $20 bills, $15,000 in $10 bills, and $10,000 in $5 bills. After 4 days, we will inform you where to deliver the money." And where is spelled W-E-R-E, and money is spelled M-O-N-Y. "We warn you for making any ding public or for notify the police. The child is in gut care. G-U-T, care.
Okay.
Indication for all letters are this symbol with 3 holes, end quote. And there were lots of misspellings. The note said the signature for future letters would be these 2 interlocking circles with 3 square holes at the bottom of the note. That's how they're going to know that this is the same person.
Right.
And there were these 2 interconnected blue circles surrounding a red circle with a hole punched through the red circle and 2 more holes to the left and to the right, which to me is like, good God, that was a lot.
Yeah.
That's the signature, though.
And the other thing that kind of strikes me about that is that I think the misspellings were intentional, because whoever came up with this idea about the inner circles with the square, I mean, that takes a lot of brains to figure that out.
Yes, but the police are going to think, maybe English isn't this person's first language.
Okay.
Yeah. But here's the thing. There are no fingerprints on the envelope. There are no fingerprints on the letter. In fact, the police found no fingerprints in the nursery. There are no fingerprints of anyone in the family or the staff in the nursery. Every surface in that nursery had been wiped clean.
Really?
The police did little to nothing to preserve the crime scene, including the evidence outside the house where they found the 2 holes in the soft ground below the nursery window with the warped shutter, the only window in the whole house that didn't latch from the inside, that didn't lock from the inside, and the ladder that was tossed in the brush near the house. The police find it to be odd looking. It's like a homemade ladder, okay?
Okay.
And the one dowel that was lying on the ground near the section of the ladder, which was about 8 to 10 feet further away from the other 2 sections near the farthest ladder section. So the ladder is tossed in the brush, and the part that's broken is even further away.
Okay.
By 11 p.m., the New Jersey State Police issued a teletype alarm, and I can hear it. Deep, 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 deep. It's going out.
Yep.
They send out this teletype alarm regarding the kidnapping, and a few moments later, the first newspaper called to get details of the kidnapping. At approximately 11:20 p.m., the Standard News Bureau in New York City calls Arthur Springer at home and wakes him up. Arthur works for the Morrows and her parents. So Arthur, who's mostly a chauffeur, goes to the Morrows' home, and he wakes them up. The state and local police are at the Lindberghs until 4 a.m. Now, by this time, the head of the state police of New Jersey is involved, and his name is Colonel H. Norman Schwarzkopf.
Oh.
Stormin' Norman's grandfather.
Oh, wow.
Stormin' Norman, the commander who led all the coalition forces in the Gulf War.
Yeah, exactly.
His grandfather was the head of the New Jersey State Police, and he worked on this case.
Wow.
Now, because Charles Lindbergh is so well known, lots of people came forward to help. Everybody wanted to help. Henry Breckinridge, he was a Wall Street attorney. William Donovan, a hero of World War I, who would later head up the Office of Strategic Services, or what is now known as the CIA. He wants to help. And these men, along with Charles, decided on their own that it was organized crime that had taken little Charlie. Organized crime. It was the mob.
Oh, how'd they come to that conclusion?
Well, here's what they think they know. The kidnapper apparently entered through the baby's window on a broken ladder found nearby, the ladder that looks like it was handmade. Mm-hmm. But how could he have backed out of this rickety ladder through the window while carrying like a 35-pound child on a windy, rainy night without disturbing anything by the window and leaving no muddy footprints on the nursery floor?
Yeah.
Now, there were muddy footprints downstairs, but not on the nursery floor, and no fingerprints. There are no fingerprints.
Wow.
Other things that didn't add up. Why would the kidnapper enter the house when all 5 adult residents are awake and moving around instead of waiting until the dead of night?
Yeah.
Except that someone told everyone in the house not to go in the baby's nursery.
There you go.
And he also said, they stole our baby.
Yeah.
Now, how did they know which room was the baby's nursery? This house is under construction. And how did this person know which nursery window had a broken shutter lock?
Sure.
And how did they not disturb anyone, including a very alert Boston Terrier named Wagoosh?
Right.
The Lindbergh baby kidnapping became an instant media sensation. Journalist H.L. Mencken called it, quote, the biggest story since the resurrection, end quote.
That's pretty big.
It was an international obsession. The morning after the baby's kidnapping, President Herbert Hoover gets word of the crime. And at that time, kidnapping was classified as a state crime. And the case didn't seem to have any grounds for federal government involvement. But Attorney General William D. Mitchell met with President Hoover and announced that the whole machinery of the Department of Justice would be set in motion to cooperate with the New Jersey authorities. And on a side note, this case would prompt the Lindbergh law, making kidnapping a federal crime.
Oh, wow.
That way you can track a kidnapper across state lines. Okay. It's called the Lindbergh law.
Did not know that.
The Bureau of Investigation, which is later going to be called the FBI, was authorized to investigate the case, while the United States Coast Guard and the U.S. Customs Service, the United States Immigration Service, and the Washington, D.C. Police were told their services might be required. This is all for one baby.
Wow.
The New Jersey officials announced a $25,000 reward for the safe return of, quote, little Lindy, end quote. It's an all-points bulletin. Everybody's out. This baby's the most important thing at that moment. I mean, everybody from the president to the head of the CIA to the FBI.
It's amazing.
And all of the initialed organizations have been on alert or been put on alert. So all of Alphabet City.
Yeah.
The police immediately want to interview the staff of both homes, the Morrows, Anne's parents, and the Lindberghs, because Schwarzkopf didn't want to rule anybody out. And at the Morrows' home, there were two servants that seemed to play into the case. But I'll let everybody be their own judge of that. Their names were Septimus Banks and Violet Sharp.
Septimus.
Told ya. Great names. Told ya. Septimus was a butler at the Morrow estate, and Violet was a waitress and a maid at the Morrow estate, and she was also in love with Septimus, and Violet liked to party, as did he. And from what I gathered from my research, they were engaged, but maybe kind of on again, off again, and possibly she had aborted his child. There's just a lot going on with those two, okay?
All right.
On the night that little Charlie disappears, Violet meets up with a man named Ernie for a blind date. He calls her around 8 p.m. And when Violet is first questioned, she said that on that night she went on a blind date with this guy, Ernie, and two other people who she didn't know. But she couldn't recall any details of the movie she said that they went to see. And she couldn't recall the names of any of the people that she saw. Interesting.
Yeah.
When they interviewed her a second time, Violet said that she'd gone to a local roadhouse and not to the movie. But then they call her back again for a third interview. And when they see her, she has lost 40 pounds.
Jeez.
When they start questioning her this third time, she gets hysterical and eventually she collapses into the floor, and a doctor is called and he says, no more interrogation for the day. She's done. And the police want her to come back the next day, but that night, Violet commits suicide by drinking silver polish because it contained cyanide.
Wow.
And now police think she knew something and she took it with her to the grave.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to come back to Violet a little bit later. But by this time, the kidnapping is world news, and the police and the reporters and even the rubberneckers had trampled all over the grounds of the estate, destroying any kind of evidence that could have been there, anything that could have been gleaned from the crime scene. That's all gone.
Right.
But Lucky Lindy, the lone eagle, Charles Lindbergh, immediately took control of the investigation and directed it away from his home. Nothing to see here. Move along.
Really?
This baby is kidnapped from the home, and he's like, there's nothing to see here. Nothing here.
Okay.
And when J. Edgar Hoover sent two FBI agents to consult on the investigation, Charles was pissed, and he sent him away. He already had the New Jersey State Police Department reporting to him and not the other way around. And Charles threatened to shoot any officer who didn't follow his protocol. The balls on this guy.
Yeah, big time.
He's large and in charge, this guy.
Man.
And if it's not weird already, it's about to get weirder. Charles Lindbergh's a weird guy, but there are all these bizarre things happening in the world, and it made the Lindberghs and others believe that this underworld mob had taken the baby, right? Mm-hmm. And just for reference, Al Capone is in jail when this kidnapping happens.
Okay. He's
under an 11-year sentence for income tax evasion, and he actually offered a $10,000 reward for baby Charlie's return. He told Arthur Brisbane, a Hearst newspaper columnist, that he would restore the child to the Lindberghs in return for his release from prison.
I'm sure he would.
And the Lindberghs and the authorities turned him down. So here's what I don't get. If Charles is thinking this is the mob, why would he turn down help from Al Capone?
Yeah.
Charles has wrongly assumed that the New York Mafia has stolen his son. He foolishly gives a gangster named Ricky Rosner a copy of the ransom note to circulate among the underworld. And this led to 13 more ransom notes being delivered to the Lindberghs. We're going to talk about those.
Okay.
The Lindberghs announced that they had authorized these two minor mob figures, Salvatore Spitali, they called him Salvi, and Irving Bitts, sometimes he's referred to as Irving Blitz, to act as go-betweens in dealing with the kidnappers. So you don't want the police and you don't want the FBI, but you'll deal with these two guys, these two kind of lower-ranked mob guys.
Yeah.
You'll deal with them. It just doesn't make sense.
Not at all.
In Washington, D.C., a man named Gaston B. Means, a private detective with a shady past, tried to interest wealthy socialites to get in on the case. One of them was Evelyn Walsh McLean. She was the owner of the 44.5-carat Hope Diamond.
Oh, man.
She gives Gaston Means $104,000, $100,000 for ransom, $4,000 for his expenses, on his promise that he could return the baby alive. Do you want to know how much money that is in today?
I can't even imagine.
It's over $2 million.
Jeez.
And it's clearly enough to pay Al Capone. Like, let's just call his bluff and see what happens.
Yeah.
She gives this money to Gaston. She never sees that money again.
Of course she didn't.
A second ransom note was received by Charles on March 2nd, 1932. Charlie is taken on March 1st. It's postmarked Brooklyn, New York, March 4th. And in this ransom, the demand had increased from $50,000 to $70,000. And a police conference was then called by the governor in Trenton, New Jersey, which was attended by prosecuting officials, police authorities, and government representatives, and various theories and policies of procedure were discussed. Private investigators were also employed by the Lindbergh's attorney, Colonel Harry Breckinridge. So it's like a shit show. Everybody is out there kind of doing their own thing.
Yep.
At this point, a third ransom note is received by the Lindbergh's attorney on March 8th, informing him that an intermediary appointed by the Lindberghs would not be accepted and requesting a note in the newspaper. So they would send these ransom notes, and they wanted their answer to go into the newspaper. That's where they would look for their answer.
Okay.
So because the kidnappers are saying this intermediary that the Lindberghs appointed, Salvatore Salve Spitali and Irving Bitts, that's a no-go for them. That's what they're saying. We're not going to talk to these mob guys.
Okay.
Then a man named Dr. John F. Condon, who's a 72-year-old teacher in the Bronx, New York, he's upset that the Lindberghs wanted these gangsters to be the go-betweens, and he taught school in New York City for over 40 years, and he actually continued to lecture in his retirement. And Dr. Condon is very patriotic. He's very outgoing. He's a self-styled civic advocate. That's what I read about him.
Okay.
A self-styled civic advocate.
And what is that?
He frequently penned letters to the editor of the local newspaper. He's very involved. He's deeply troubled by the plight of the Lindberghs, so Dr. Condon writes an open letter to the kidnappers in the paper in which he offered to act as the intermediary. He's going to be the liaison. And the following day, the fourth ransom note was received by Dr. Condon that indicated he would be acceptable to be a go-between. So this guy just out of the blue is saying, I'll do it. I'm going to step up and I'm going to do it. The newspapers, by the way, are loving every minute of this.
Absolutely.
Meanwhile, Charles is, he's keeping the FBI and the CIA and the state police at a distance. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Condon takes his letter to the Lindberghs at their home in Hopewell, and Charles conferred with his friend and advisor, Henry Breckinridge, his attorney, and they were convinced that the letter writer knew something because the signature seemed to be the same, the interlocking symbols, and that was never printed in the newspapers,
right.
But it was in this letter. Okay. And Dr. Condon got the go-ahead and received $70,000 in cash and gold notes and $50,000 in gold certificates, mostly in $20 denominations, and $20,000 in standard U.S. bills with serial numbers that had been recorded. So they're brand new bills, brand new dollar bills,
sure.
And these gold notes, which I had to look up what that was.
Okay.
On March 11th, 10 days later, 10 days after this baby's been taken, an advertisement appeared in the New York American that said, quote, "I accept, money is ready, signed Jaffe." And the name Jaffe came from Condon's initials, JFC, Dr. Condon's initials.
Okay.
And it was used in the belief that only the kidnapper would recognize it. So they're telling the kidnapper through the paper, "I accept, the money is ready." At about 8:30 on March 12th, after receiving an anonymous telephone call, Dr. Condon received the 5th ransom note delivered by Joseph Peroni, a taxicab driver who received it from an unidentified stranger. You can't make this up. The message stated that another note would be found beneath a stone at a vacant stand 100 feet from an outlying subway station. Now, this note, the 6th, was found by Dr. Condon, and the following instructions therein, the doctor met an unidentified man who called himself John at the Woodlawn Cemetery near 233rd Street and Jerome Avenue.
Okay.
At a cemetery. They discussed payment of the ransom money, and the stranger agreed to furnish a token of the child's identity. We want to make sure you really have the child. And Dr. Condon was accompanied by a bodyguard, except while talking to this John, Charles Lindbergh himself is in a car nearby. He's like watching. He's there, but there's no police there. But there's a private bodyguard with him and Dr. Condon. Okay. I mean, the fact that he just keeps keeping the authorities out of it is just a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
During the next few days, Dr. Condon repeated his advertisements, urging further contact and stating his willingness to pay the ransom. But he wanted proof that the kidnappers really had the baby. He wanted this proof of life. And the baby's sleeping suit, that's what they wanted. That's what they called it, his sleeping suit. That's the token of identity. And a 7th ransom note where the little sleeping suit came with the ransom note. They were both received by Dr. Condon on March 16th. The baby goes missing on March 1st. 16 days.
All right.
Okay. The suit was delivered to Charles and was immediately identified by Anne as her sons, and this convinced the family and the investigators that the people writing the ransom notes were indeed the kidnappers.
They were legit.
Dr. Condon continued to place ads in the newspaper trying to set up this exchange, and an 8th ransom note was received by Dr. Condon on March 21st, insisting on complete compliance and advising that the kidnapping had been planned for an entire year. Then on March 29th, Betty Gow, the Lindbergh nurse, is out on the property, and she finds little Charlie's thumb guard that he was wearing at the time of the kidnapping near the entrance to the estate. Really? 28 days later, you find that they were supposed to have been scouring the place for a month, and a month later, she just happens upon it. And if you don't know what a thumb guard is, it's to keep the baby from sucking his thumb back then.
Yep.
The following day, March 30th, the 9th ransom note was received by Dr. Condon, threatening to increase the demand to $100,000 and refusing a code for use in newspaper columns. And the 10th ransom note received by Dr. Condon on April 1st instructed him to have the money ready the following night, to which Condon replied in an ad in the press. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Wow.
He says he would be there April 1st. This baby's been gone an entire month at this point.
Right.
The 11th ransom note was delivered to Dr. Condon on April 2nd, 1932 by an unidentified taxi driver who said he received it from an unknown man, another taxi driver. Again, you can't make this shit up.
Yeah.
Dr. Condon found the 12th ransom note under a stone in front of a greenhouse at 3225 East Tremont Avenue in the Bronx, as instructed by the 11th note. And shortly thereafter, on the same evening, April 2nd, following the instructions contained in the 12th note, 1 month after the baby boy's disappearance, Dr. Condon and Charles Lindbergh go to a Bronx cemetery, Woodlawn. This is where the kidnapper wants to meet. The police and the FBI are all kept out of this. Charles wants to handle it on his own and in his own way. And when they arrive at this cemetery, a man calls out to Dr. Condon and says, "Hey, doctor, over here." And according to Condon, the man sounded foreign but stayed in the shadows during the conversation, and Condon was thus unable to get a close look at his face. I want you to remember that.
Okay.
The man said his name was John, and in exchange for the $50,000, Dr. Condon received a 13th note with instructions on where to find little baby Charlie Lindbergh. And Charles waits in the car nearby, and he's going to say that he heard the voice of the man in the cemetery, and that the voice of the man and the face of the man that Dr. Condon can't see. But eventually he's going to say, I know what he looks like and I know what he sounded like. Okay?
Jeez.
So from the car, he's saying that he can see this.
Right.
Now, the note says, quote, the boy is on the Bode, B-O-A-D, Nellie. You will find the Bode between Horseneck Bay and Gay Head near Elizabeth Island. He's talking about Martha's Vineyard. You'll find the baby on a boat named Nellie is what it means. So Lindbergh searches all along Cape Cod, the Virginia Capes, in Norfolk and South Jersey, and he finds nothing. There's no boat named Nellie, and there's no baby. And they're hoping that the money will start to show up or the gold notes will start to show up and they can trace it to the kidnapper because they don't have a baby, no body, they got nothing.
Right.
And I mean, they gave him the money, and now they have zip. Then on May 12th, as Charles is returning from Norfolk, Virginia, a delivery truck driver named Orville Wilson and his assistant, William Allen, pulled to the side of the road about 4.5 miles south of the Lindbergh home because William's got to get out and go to the bathroom. So he gets out of the truck, he goes into the trees alongside of the road, and there he sees the body of a toddler. The skull is badly fractured and the body is decomposed with evidence of scavenging by animals. There were indications of an attempt at a hasty burial. His nanny, Betty Gow, identified the baby as the missing Charles Lindbergh Jr. from his overlapping toes on his right foot. He had hammer toes, and he was wearing the shirt that she made. And it appeared that baby Charlie was killed by a blow to the head. So he's looked for virtually everywhere, and after 2 months, he's found on the property. You can see the house from where his little body is found. And this kind of just stinks to high heaven. It all seems like an inside job, right?
Yep.
And when Charles gets home, Charles and Betty Gow together identify the baby's body in Trenton, New Jersey at the morgue. But after Charles says, that's my son, he has him immediately cremated the very next day. The very next day, without an autopsy, taking any clues about his killer with him.
Wow.
Next week, we will discuss the fallout from the murder of the Lindbergh baby, the ransom trail, and following the money until someone is held responsible for the murder of Charles Lindbergh Jr. And for now, that's all I have to say about that. For nearly 7 years, Jane Doe has lived in the shadows, her past buried deep beneath layers of secrecy and silence. After completing more than was asked of her in her last assignment for the enigmatic Kaiwolf project, Jane Doe vanished without a trace, leaving behind a trail of dead bodies and unanswered questions. But now, as the specter of her past returns with a vengeance, Jane finds herself thrust back into a world she thought she'd left behind forever. When her former sins come knocking on her door, Jane is faced with an impossible choice: continue to hide in the shadows, or once again take up arms against the forces that threaten to tear apart the fabric of society. With enemies lurking around every corner and allies who may not be what they seem, Jane must rely on her wits, training, and her unyielding determination to survive. And while trust is a luxury she cannot afford, Jane must confront the truth about herself and her past. As the clock ticks, she realizes that the line between family, friend, and foe are razor thin, and in the end, the only person she can rely on is herself. Jane Doe 4 Charlotte is available September 24th, 2024. No name, No regrets, no mercy.
All right, my take on this?
Your take on part one?
Yeah, it's an inside job and Charles did it. I don't know. I mean, everything's so fishy between, the Dr. Condon. And,
very hinky.
Yeah,
it's all very
this
hinky.
guy all of a sudden shows up and now everybody's trusting him to be the liaison. Come on.
And he's keeping the CIA, he's keeping the FBI,
Yeah.
and he's got the state police reporting to him.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack in part two.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure I've got a lot more of the bum, bum, bum to go. So.
No, we're actually you've done all the bump, bumps,
Okay.
and now the foreshadowing is all going to show up in part two. You're going to be like, aha.
Well, I look forward to seeing what happens next. But what happens next now is a little bless your heart.
Well, bless your heart.
All right, number one, I'm calling Take It Off. Take it all off.
Oh, I could really say so much right now, but I'm just not gonna. I'm not gonna incriminate you.
All right. A 23-year-old woman in Orlando was arrested for stealing armfuls of clothes from a Tommy Hilfiger store.
Okay.
Ramaya Johnson and a female accomplice fled through an emergency exit of a Tommy Hilfiger store with tons of clothing and hopped into a waiting getaway vehicle.
So somebody was waiting for them to steal this stuff.
Yep.
Okay.
Cops were able to track down the vehicle used in the getaway and found Johnson, the accomplice, and bags full of Tommy Hilfiger. Say that 10 times fast. Merchandise.
My dad always called it Tommy Hilfiger.
Finger.
It's
a lot easier to say.
Whatever works for you, right?
Exactly. The merchandise still had tags and anti-theft devices on.
Oh, wow.
And she even, here we go, was wearing a Tommy Hilfiger shirt with the tag still on it when she was arrested. Of course, they were busted and convicted.
Aw, bless their heart.
All right, number two, I'm calling, well, how'd that get there?
Okay.
A guy in Phoenix called the cops on Sunday night to report a break-in at his apartment, but he ended up being the one getting arrested. I've done some of these before, but I love these.
Okay.
The cops showed up and looked around, but didn't find any sign of a break-in, but they did see the guy's huge stash of drugs. He hadn't bothered to hide any of the drugs or paraphernalia before they got there. The officers, get this, seized 6,000 fentanyl pills.
Holy cow.
Over 390 grams of meth and almost $5,000 in cash, plus digital scales, baggies, and needles and other items associated with drug use.
That's quite an operation.
Ooh, he was arrested on several felony drug charges.
I bet.
All right, number three, and finally. Full of crap.
Okay.
Okaloosa County, Florida. We're in Florida again. A Crestview man is arrested after deputies say they found him in possession of drugs, paraphernalia, during a traffic stop Saturday. Stephen Copeland, 29, is charged with trafficking, heroin, possession of oxycodone, possession of drug paraphernalia, and traffic violations.
I like and traffic violations. Okay.
According to an arrest report from the Okaloosa County Sheriff's Office, deputies stopped Copeland on Hulbert Road. Some of these names are really hard to get through. Near Fort Walton Beach.
Ooh,
that one I know.
I like Fort Walton Beach.
Yep. When a deputy noticed he had an expired car registration.
Oh, that'll do it.
Yeah. After the OCSO K-9 Burt alerted the Copeland's truck, deputies say they found the heroin under the seat. More heroin on the passenger floorboard.
Wow.
Oxycodone, a plastic bag with methamphetamine residue, a scale, and assorted drug paraphernalia consistent with drug use and distribution.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. Copeland told the deputies that it was a chocolate laxative and not heroin. And he believed the pills to be fake.
Okay.
The report says.
Okay.
And guess what?
What?
Police didn't buy it.
Of course not.
So he was busted.
You know what the moral of that story is?
What?
Get your tags
Yeah.
straightened out.
Yeah. And don't say heroin is X-Lax.
I've actually been pulled over before and they're like, your tags are expired. And then I like get my actual tags with the little sticker out of my glove compartment. And I'm like, I have it. I just haven't put it on the car yet. And he's like, well, you know that we give them to you after you pay your taxes, so you will put them on the car. I was like, it was cold and I was afraid to put it on because I didn't think it would stick. Anyway, moral of the story. Get your tags right and put sticker on.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so there's your bless your heart.
Well, if you have a bless your heart or you know somebody's heart who needs blessing, all you got to do is go to hitchtohomicide.com. And when you get there, there's a pull down menu. And while you're there, you can also suggest a case or tell us about your brush with true crime.
Yes.
That's my amazing husband out there.
That's my beautiful bride in the booth.
Join us next time on Hitch to Homicide.
Bye, y'all.